Corepunk is a top-down ARPG-MMO that was announced in 2019. It's being developed by the company ArtificialCore and set in a world inspired by steampunk, where you'll find a sort of mixing of the ages of technology, from guns and blasters to swords and bows. Corepunk has no official release date set in stone, however, I was lucky enough to be given access to the recent alpha testing. This is the second alpha testing that they have done. I had no idea about the game during the first one, but I was excited to get my hands on this new MMO. So today I'm going to take you guys through my experience with Corepunk, the alpha testing, and mostly the early game, to show you guys what you can expect. I want to preface this by saying, in some ways, I'm more excited for this game than 90% of what we see coming out on the market. But in other ways, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But before we jump into it, I would just like to remind everyone that channel memberships are active, and that's the best way to support me if you've been enjoying my content. If not, a like and a sub always help me out a bunch, and feel free to join our new community Discord to chat with like-minded individuals. There's a link at the top of the description. Now, let's get into Corepunk Alpha 2, Day 1. Wow, character creation is really cool. I made a cool class. I got a couple minutes of gameplay in. So, on the first day of the alpha testing, apparently the developers ran into quite a major bug. They had to shut down the servers entirely. In fact, they even had to do a hard reset and redistribute keys to the thousands of players that already had keys prior. I can imagine that this was a logistical nightmare, and it took them a little over 24 hours before they had the whole situation figured out. Okay, let's try this again. So, character customization introduces you to a few different races and classes. Basically, you can choose your race and gender on the left side, and depending on the race that you choose, you'll have access to different types of classes, from shaman to destroyer to infiltrator. Each of these classes comes with a class preview that allows you to take a look at their abilities and understand a bit more about the playstyle that accompanies those. In the first day before the reset, I had actually chosen to be a destroyer. However, today I wanted to try a class with a bit more range, so I went with a ranger. Actual character customization is a little lackluster. You basically get a few different presets and colors, but I would like to see more options in the future, as right now it's pretty bare bones. Anyway, I named myself Waydot because that's my name, and we got loaded in. You're immediately teleported into the world and introduced to nicely voice-acted robots.
Danger 0.5%. Utility 0.3%.
The stylistic, cartoony graphics of the game reminded me of an almost top-down World of Warcraft, but with its own unique makeup. Overall, the game looked really clean. You're told to head north and grab some forms, but first, let's take a look at the user interface. It's right-click to move and hold to keep moving. I opened up my inventory and I was pleasantly surprised to see that you have a ton of space, 120 slots. One of my absolute biggest gripes with games right now is inventory space. It seems like every game is trying to limit you in this regard in order to sell you more inventory space for IRL money later on. Afterwards, I opened up my map to see not much. Basically, you have to uncover the map to find points of interest, NPCs, different locations. Corepunk definitely doesn't hold your hand in terms of a new player experience. Besides quest text and context clues, you really need to pay attention to where you need to go in order to complete or do quests and objectives. There's no real navigation system, and I'm not sure if they plan on adding one later on. Afterwards, I took a look at the talent system. Basically, at level 5, 10, and 20, you can choose a particular talent tree that you would like to spec into. These could be damage-focused, tanking-focused, sustain-focused, or even crafting and gathering-focused. This is a pretty cool system that allows for even 20 people of the same class to all play the game and build their account differently, depending on what they specialize into. You're also shown the weapon mastery system, which I didn't get a chance to delve too deeply into, but it's fairly self-explanatory. It's a further customization system that allows you to enhance and upgrade your class's abilities depending on which ones you deem the most effective or most important. At level 1, you don't yet have access to all of your skills, however, you have enough skill points to purchase one of the 3 available. So make sure to choose carefully. Now, the actual base UI looks fantastic. Your skills are down here along with your HP and your mana. Your stat boosting equipment and weapons are over here. And then also a quest tracker in the top right corner. And really, the rest of the game view is completely open. I opened up my hero page, which displays your character and some equipment. Bear in mind, the equipment here gives no stats, only appearance. As far as I can tell, the only stat boosting equipment, like I said before, will be equipped down here. I made my way north and stumbled across another NPC with a camp. He tells you to gather some wood from his pile, and for doing so, you complete a quest which awards you 5 campfires. And it also gives you the recipe to learn how to craft your own campfires from normal wood. We'll get into how absolutely essential campfires are to the gameplay a bit later on. For now, I took a look at the crafting and skills page. Basically, there are 9 different skills, 4 for gathering and refining, 4 for crafting, and 1 outside of that category, which is cooking. The gathering skills include mining, logging, herbalism, and butchery. And the crafting skills are mysticism, weaponsmithing, alchemy, and construction. I made my way further north to find the forms that my main quest was instructing me to gather, and I was told to absolutely not touch anything inside of this NPC's house.
Unrelated activity may be considered trespassing. In simpler terms, don't touch anything else.
However, words mean nothing to me, and so I raided his fridge for a piece of cheese. Anyway, I was instructed to head even further north into the village in order to meet up with Zik's brother. Along the way, you're going to find certain barrels and items that you can interact with and destroy. These can drop things like food, gold, and even sometimes recipes and other items. I found it to be pretty good practice, at least in the beginning, to just destroy anything that I could interact with. I made it to the outskirts of Golden Field Town, which is the village that I was directed to, and I met with Zoltar, who gave me a quest to gather 10 rat tails from rats in the field. Sounds easy enough. Now, I'm not gonna lie, combat is pretty slow to start the game. I had acquired a net throwing skill, which could CC one of my enemies for a few seconds, but the auto attack is really slow and abilities have pretty long cooldowns in this game. So you gotta make sure that you use them very carefully and at the correct time. These 2 small rats had already taken half of my HP, and this was where I first realized that I need to take combat very slowly and very carefully in Corepunk, especially in the early game. Unfortunately, I couldn't take on both of these rats and had to run away with my rat tail tucked between my legs. I thought maybe I'll just wait for my health and mana to recover fully before I go back and try and take on that lone rat. Except, only one problem, this game doesn't feature base health and mana recovery. What your HP is at, that's what it's at. I mentioned those campfires earlier and how important they are. This is why. Basically, you can regenerate by sitting at the campfire or eating certain foods and drinks, which will restore health and or mana. If you're sitting at a campfire and you consume any food or drink, it will also increase the food's efficiency depending on the tier of campfire that you're using. The base wood tier of campfire that I had provided a 50% increase to food efficiency. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this ended up being a massive pain point for me while playing Corepunk. Some quests obviously required you to participate in combat, and health and mana are finite resources that can be difficult to come by. You don't necessarily have enough food and drink in the early game to sustain yourself. You don't have enough wood to make enough campfires, and to top it off, most of the enemies in this game come in groups. You can find single enemy encounters, but I would say 50 to 60% of the encounters that I came across are in groups of 2 or more. Although I have to be honest, they did mention that this was an important reason and part of this alpha testing, as they wanted to get better information on new player balancing in the new player areas. So you're welcome for the feedback, Corepunk developers. Now please don't balance the entire game around health and mana regeneration, because honestly, it's a bit of a trapping feeling at times. So I didn't quite finish the rat quest, but I wanted to explore the rest of the village and find more NPCs and potentially easier quests to participate in. I stumbled across Grizz here, who gave me a quest recommended for level 5, but he also has a shop. Inside you can find this implant and circles and amulets, and these are the types of equipment which are actually stat boosting. However, they cost 24 gold a piece, and currently I had 0.97th of a piece of a gold coin, so we'll come back later. Now, basically the entire village has access to NPCs, which each specialize in one of the gathering or crafting skills, and each of them has a quest relating to that skill. Some of these you can do at a recommended level of 1, however, other ones are going to require a higher level. I came across Big Mama, who is the cooking instructor, and here you can also set your returner to be able to teleport back whenever. There's a free permanent campfire here that can regenerate your health, so it's super useful. Big Mama told me to make some wheat flour, which requires wheat seeds, which you can get from random interactable bags of wheat out in the fields surrounding Golden View Town. I killed a few more rats and I got all of my seeds and I went back. After completing the quest, Big Mama taught me how to make bread and gives me some ingredients to do so. Bread is really the first useful food that you stumble across, as its health regeneration rate is so much higher than the other foods. But I will say the resources to make bread are not super easy to come across if you wanted to stockpile up a whole bunch of them. It would probably take a fair amount of time, and we got stuff to do. Anyway, I basically made my way around the entirety of Golden View Town, talking to all the different NPCs who taught me about their respective form of crafting and getting every quest that I could. I even continued the main story quest thinking it should give me something to do that was more appropriate for my level, but no, level 7. Okay. I decided to continue killing the rats to get all of their tails, and while doing so, I actually got myself to level 2, which allowed me to unlock one of my abilities. I chose Arrow Rain. It's a small area of effect ability, pretty self-explanatory, but having that extra ability already made a world of difference in combat. So after collecting all of the rat tails, it was now dark out. I couldn't really tell if there were any differences between day and night in Corepunk, besides the obvious visual differences. It can be a little bit more difficult to see resources and things around you, but otherwise everything seemed to behave relatively similar. Handing in the rat tails also gave me 2 rewards which I could choose from. We got some of the stat boosting equipable gear, which I chose the one that increased my attack power, and we also got to choose a cosmetic chest piece. But hey, looking pretty good for a lowly level 2 ranger. But I'm not gonna lie, at this point, all of my quests were way too high level. I was afraid to try anything outside of my level range, as even just fighting 2 level 2 rats was enough to chip away half of my HP. And I was pretty confused about what I was supposed to be doing. I'm not sure if they plan on creating a more cohesive tutorial for new players whenever the game is actually released, but in its current state, I have to say the game doesn't do a great job at pointing you in the right direction. In fact, it doesn't really point you in any direction. Even some of the quest text is very vague and hard to understand where certain things might come from. I don't always think this is a bad thing for games, by the way. I don't mind having to figure things out on my own, but due to the constant challenge of maintaining your health and mana in Corepunk, it can be very punishing to go the wrong way. You don't want to waste resources and time on the wrong thing. Eventually, I decided to just go exploring and start seeing what I could find away from the village. Perhaps I'll stumble across some easier to do quests. I find if you ever get completely lost in a game, just start exploring and you'll usually find your path. The first new area that I stumbled across was a sort of glade in which lived a guru and his 2 acolytes. Oh, by the way, some of the dialogue and the charm in the characters of this game are absolutely hilarious. It can be worth talking to NPCs and finding out their stories for just how well written and comedic they are.
Me and Tiff are Guru David's acolytes, which means bitches in French. We sleep by day, sometimes do a little yoga to get the yokels horny. And every night is a howling freak fest in the yoga house.
Anyway, I finally stumbled across my first gathering nodes. These can be found in higher or lower concentrations throughout different zones of the map. Many of my quests required items that you can gather out in the world, so I was pretty happy to find these. There was a herbalism node which gave me roots, and I also came across a mining node. Afterwards, I stumbled across Jimi Hendrix, and yes, that's exactly what you think it is. But I decided it's time to really delve into the crafting and gathering system. From what I was reading in the global chat, that was basically my next option. You get quite a large amount of experience from turning in quests, and basically all of my quests had me gathering crafting items and materials. Okay, maybe this area is a little high level. That's like 5 level 8s chasing me. What the hell? Luckily, I got away. I took my returner back to town to stock up before heading out on my journey. I made a bunch of wheat flour, which I could turn into bread, which would help with hit points. Also, crafting takes quite a while. I could imagine if you were making a stack of 20 of basically anything, it could take a few minutes. You get experience from crafting both in the skill and towards your next level as well, so it's beneficial and definitely fairly AFK. So I decided to head south into the Dusk-Tide Forest. That's the area that you're first dropped into the game with the portal. So I thought it should be the easiest area for me to gather items in. I needed basically everything from chopping trees to mining rocks to harvesting plants and even skinning animals. Unfortunately, to my dismay, this forest down here was no safer. Level 7s and 8s, which could absolutely destroy me, roamed the entire area. However, I found that running is actually a really effective strategy. And these creatures didn't end up being as much of a nuisance as I first expected when trying to gather. Eventually, I found the first logging node, a faint Timberheart reserve, and afterwards a faint petrified rootwood, and then some more hazelnuts. I also found a level 4 green turtle. This is one of the creatures that you can kill and process afterwards to get things like bone, skin, blood, etc. There's only one problem. Level 4 turtles are kinda tough when you're level 2. We literally killed each other. Death makes you basically drop one stack of items at random from your inventory, and you have a certain amount of time to make it back from what is essentially a graveyard. You're put into a spirit form, it's very similar to World of Warcraft, and you have to make it back to your body. Luckily, I still made it in time to not only pick up the sugar that I dropped, but also to process the turtle. But then, something interesting happened. I ran around this damn forest for about 10 minutes straight without running into a person, without running into any NPCs, and definitely without finding any gathering nodes. At this point, I started to think something might be wrong, so I logged out and back in, and it placed me in a different location of the forest than I had logged out in. It seemed like that had fixed everything because not long after, I found another gathering node. A sigh of relief, but then I went like 5 more minutes without finding anything. I thought to myself, there's no way that it can be this difficult to find gathering nodes when prior I was finding them like every 30 seconds. I decided I'm going to head back to town to figure out what's going on. And that's when I found out about ghost layers. As you can see in town, there are no NPCs, no items or objects to interact with, and I was somehow randomly put on this layer. This seems to be quite the issue. Luckily, logging in and out seemed to fix the issue and it would bring me back to a normal layer, but it seemed to happen at random. And while I was out gathering, it was tough to tell exactly when it would happen, as you would sometimes go a few minutes without seeing a gathering node or mobs, even in a completely normal functioning layer. The problem persisted and happened a few more times, and it seemed like ArtificialCore were having some server and netcode issues. Which is fine, it's an alpha test, and that's what those are for, finding issues like this. But I really was starting to make progress at this point. I had gathered tons of items, I could even hand in some of the original crafting quests that I was given, and I got myself to level 3. I even took on this level 4 boar, and I managed to not die. Let's go. After I got myself to level 4, which unlocked a new ability for me to use that would shoot a cone of arrows in front of me, knocking both me and my enemies back. Then, while doing some more gathering, I took a look at my skills page and I realized something. Each of the gathering skills has a percentage next to them. And the higher percentage that you are in one of the gathering skills, the more bonuses that you will receive for actually using that skill. For example, if you have 40% in logging, that allows you to gather 2 resources from every tree. However, if I were to switch to doing more herbalism than logging, the percentage would drop from logging and go into herbalism. Basically, this allows you to spec into whatever resource you want to focus on gathering currently. You could even them all out and be a sort of jack of trades but master of none, or if you wanted to really hyper-focus on one particular type of gathering, you would get all sorts of benefits from doing so. It's actually a pretty cool system. A while later, I narrowly killed 2 boars with only 1 HP remaining in order to get to this chest. However, unfortunately, when I only needed 1 more second to open the chest, the first boar that I killed respawned and killed me. So I think respawn timers could be a little bit longer. Okay, that's my feedback. Back at the village, I got myself to level 5 from crafting, and this is actually a fairly significant level, as level 5 unlocks the talent system that we had talked about prior. I could choose from these 8 subcategories of talents, which each break down into a further talent tree. I chose the Hunter as it increased attack speed, which would be really helpful to me as a ranger. And then you can further customize it where you can choose how you would like to increase your attack speed. For example, when I'm below 50% health. Or I could gain 2% attack speed for each auto attack up to 10%. Like I said before, this talent tree really allows you to separate yourself even from lots of other people who are playing the same class as you. I completed another quest which gave me an implant that would increase my health, and then I was transported back to high school, as I was given the recipe to make joints. Hell yes. Someone in global chat mentioned that you can purchase new weapons from the weaponsmith. So I made my way over, and for the not so cheap price of 67 gold pieces, I got myself the Star Shard bow. It does significantly more damage than my original weapon, and it's blue. So that's cool. But really, the new bow was a massive upgrade. It probably almost 2x'd my DPS. While killing these gnats, I got myself to level 6 and trained my new AoE ability, which was seriously powerful, though it used a ton of mana. And that's basically where I called it for day 1. To put things into perspective, I had played for around 8 hours just to get to level 6. The leveling in progress is very, very slow in Corepunk, but I was excited for day 2. The next morning, I was reading through the Corepunk Discord server when I had heard that some accounts had been affected by rollbacks, and that made me a little uneasy. But luckily, I was still level 6, so it seems like I was unaffected. I was playing for a little while when I started to receive this error code, 403, over and over again. I couldn't get back into the game. And then another Discord message from Corepunk official, incoming maintenance again. The game will be offline for another hour or so. And who knows if it actually will be offline for an hour, I'm not sure. I started making this video immediately after I saw that message. That's when I decided I had seen enough of this alpha testing. Although the testing has been a bit of a shit show when it comes to server-side net issues, I applaud the team at ArtificialCore for sticking through with it and making it happen despite the problems. Now, here's the thing. Corepunk needs a lot of work, as does any game in its alpha stage of development, and we're gonna get into all of that. But there is an intangible element here that I have to explain, which is a phenomenon that happens to me every once in a while when I really enjoy a game. That phenomenon occurs when I first wake up in the morning and I'm having my morning tea and having some breakfast, and I realize, holy shit, I'm excited to play this game today. It doesn't happen all the time. In fact, it happens very rarely these days for me personally, especially just to go play a temporary alpha testing of an incomplete game. But I have to be honest, I was stoked to log back into the game and play more. The gathering and crafting system, along with the find your own way sort of questing and the very slow progression that allowed you to take a lot of pride in your character, it was compelling. But let's talk about some of the things that I think are really going to need to change before we see this game fully released, at least concerning the new player experience. So number 1, I think we need better and more solutions for health and mana regeneration, especially at very low levels with no access to resources. The absurd level of tedium required to constantly maintain your health and mana led to a feeling of being trapped, and it was not fun. Number 2, mob levels in the starting areas need to be scaled down and adjusted and balanced. I went from killing level 1 and 2 rats to running away from level 8 flying wasps. There was almost nothing in between. And we need less packs of mobs and more single target mobs. The mob density is just too high in this regard. Number 3, I would like some better navigation. I'm not saying you need to hold the player's hands. Corepunk is trying to be a more traditional and hardcore MMO, I get it, but some more direction and hints in quest text is definitely required, as it becomes annoying to try and understand and remember everything that was said to you. And number 4, we need a rebalancing of resources in areas. My logging experience was nearing 500. Trees were absolutely abundant, they were everywhere I went, but I found it very difficult to level up butchery, which I probably only received about 40 experience in total. And finally, I think we need a better introduction to the difficulty and risks of combat. There is no combat tutorial or instruction on how difficult and challenging certain encounters might be. That's why I was running away from 2 level 2 rats in the first 10 minutes of gameplay. But those are my 5 most important changes that I would like to see concerning the new player experience. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or have some of your own ideas about what they should do moving forward. All in all, I actually see a ton of potential in Corepunk. The game looks fantastic, the systems are super intriguing, the crafting and gathering is addicting, and I'm really excited to take a deeper look into this game in the future as we get into things like beta testing and further playtesting. I really want to see what it looks like at the end game with the dungeons and the raids and the group content. I'm going to be honest, the problems I see right now with the game seem fairly easy to fix and implement strategies to mitigate. I'm officially bought into the hype, and I can't wait to see more from this game in the future. Anyway, folks, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget a like, a comment, a subscription. Those things help a bunch. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider becoming a channel member. But I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.